All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 11th edition of Who Knew? I'm Melissa Markey, filling in for Whitney today. I don't want to waste any time getting started because we have a wonderful program for you today. Resident Ann Archer is going to interview resident Jane Neer. I hope you are as excited as I am to hear her story of determination and how she overcame so many challenges during her lifetime. As a reminder, we will take questions from the audience at the end of the program. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ann.
Thank you, Melissa. And Jane, I am so honored to be doing this interview with you, and I've so enjoyed getting to know you and preparing for it. Can we start out by your telling us what cerebral palsy is and how it happened to you?
Yes. Cerebral palsy is a brain disorder. It usually occurs during birth. It can occur later in life if one happens to fall on his or her head and hits the right spot in the brain. But it usually, there are two types of cerebral palsy. One is athetoid, which is what I am, and the other is spastic. And the difference is the spastic cannot be shaken loose. You have to take it and do this. The athetoid is just very loose, very loose. And I was lucky to be athetoid.
Tell us about your birth. Let's start really truly in the beginning.
Mother was in labor 48 hours, and I was fighting to get out. And I wanted to get out of that birth canal. And I think Mother wanted me out as much as I did. And so she pushed, and I pushed, and whoo, I popped out. And so my father was a doctor, and he was right behind the doors, and he said, something's wrong, and I wasn't breathing, and I need to have a blood transfusion. Fortunately, my father had the same type of blood as I did, so I was transfused and got to the point that they could take me to the nursery,
What happened after that? How did things progress? What did they discover was wrong, and what did your father do about it?
Okay, my father, at that time you were kept in the hospital for 2 weeks. So when I came home, Mother and Daddy realized that I was not kicking and moving both hands. So Daddy said, I'm going back to the pediatrician and ask him what's wrong and to please find me the best doctor there is, and I will take her to him. And that's what he did, and the doctor said, I think she has CP. And so they found this wonderful Dr. Winthrop Phelps in Baltimore at Hopkins, and he was the pioneer of cerebral palsy.
And he also became
He also became my second father. I mean, he and I had the most wonderful relationship.
Well, one of the first things that you had to do as a small child, because you were naturally right-handed, was shift to being left-handed. Tell us about that.
That is correct. And so in order to do that, they would tie my right hand around my back, and then they would throw objects on the floor, and they would see that my right shoulder would go to fetch the object, but it could not complete the task. And in doing this, you are crossing the pathways in the brain. So you've got to be very sure that there is no stuttering occurred. And
no stuttering?
No stuttering, no stuttering. I was very lucky, very lucky. But they worked with me for quite a while with therapy and with doctors and all at Hopkins, and I got through, no stuttering.
Now, the next challenge comes school. Your family chose collegiate for you, and as I understand it, your father walked into your classroom before you did.
That is correct, that is correct. My father walked into the classroom carrying my brace, and he said, I want to tell you about a little girl that's coming in here that has blonde hair, blue eyes, just like you all, but she has a different way of walking, and she'll be wearing a brace. And so, but the most important thing is that you do not pick her up if she falls. Now, if she's hurt, that's something else. You pick her up. But if she's not hurt, let her struggle to get up, because that's how she learns determination and independence.
Evidently, during this stage of your childhood, you had a lot of pent-up energy that needed to be used. Tell us about those adventures.
I did. I had a lot. Dr. Phelps suggested that I do horseback riding.
Wow.
And so I said, whoa, wonderful. I love that. And so I went out to Bruce's stables, and I was able to get onto the left side of the horse by putting my strong leg into the saddle, into the stirrup, and then throwing my right leg over and getting it into the stirrup. And then I was riding, what do you call it, when you have a hump in the middle of the saddle? Western style, yes, Western style. And so I was doing that, and then finally we progressed to cantering. And that was so smooth and so wonderful.
To canter.
To canter. And I said, wow, I am cantering.
Oh, that scares me to death. But also there was the question of the bike.
Yes, yes. I wanted to ride a bike. And Daddy had a two-wheel bike, and our house was kind of on a slope, the backyard. And so Daddy would take me up to the top of the walk and said, now, Jane, I'm going to hold on to the back of your seat, and you just go on down. And I said, okay. And I went on down, and next thing I knew, Daddy was not behind me, and I was riding. I said, I can ride. It was so exciting. It was so exciting.
And gained you more independence than you had before.
Absolutely, yes. That's the name of the game, independence.
Well, at the age of 23, you decided to go to school in Switzerland, and you had certain reasons for wanting to do that. Tell us about it.
Well, I wanted to go, and I wanted to drink a beer in Germany and ski in Switzerland, and I was determined. And so when I said this to my parents, my mother said, oh, no, typical mother. And so my father said, well, let's go to Baltimore and see Dr. Phelps. He's the one that'll make the decision. I said, wonderful, because he's on my side. He'll let me do it. So I got up there, and I ran into his office, and I said, Dr. Phelps, I'm going to Switzerland. And he said, so I want to drink beer in Germany, and I want to ski in Switzerland. And he says, well, why not? I said, that's exactly right. And my mother says, but she could fall and break a leg. I said, Mama, I could fall and break a leg in the shower. Should I stop bathing? So Mother hung her head and didn't say another word.
So you did go, and you hired a private instructor, and you did ski, but you did fall. So
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Yes, I had long skis. That was when you had skis that were as tall as your hand. And so I hit something, and I fell, and my bindings didn't release, and my right knee was just going like this, back and forth in the air. And so by the time the ski instructor got to me, I was in a lot of pain. So the school sent me to Zurich to an orthopedic surgeon, and he ordered mud packs for my knee. Can you imagine mud packs?
The daughter of a surgeon being treated with mud packs. Why not?
Oh, well, anyway, I finally got over it and returned to Lugano, and I called home for some tennis shoes because I wanted to climb a mountain in Lugano. I loved it. And so I wanted to be sure that I could really ski.
Well, let's
go back to the
let's bring you
right.
back
Yeah.
to a job here in Richmond, I gather, but you left that job and took a second job in Mount Snow, where you could continue to ski.
That's correct. That's correct. I quit my job at MCV, and I drove to Mount Snow for the ski season, and I worked for the Director of Public Relations. Weekends were on Monday and Tuesday, since the slopes were crowded on Saturday and Sunday. But anyway, I had a Swiss ski instructor who took me under his wing, and took me up to the top of the mountain, and he said, "Now I want you to ski down behind me." And I really couldn't do it too well. But it turned out that the Lang boot company was coming to Mount Snow. And so my instructor talked to him, and they were very interested in me. So they gratis me a pair of boots and shorter skis, this GLM method, and he wanted to put a little lift in the bottom of my right heel boot. And then he wanted to attach a wedge onto the ski binding that would release when the boot came off. So that was done, and then my Swiss instructor took me up to the top of the mountain, and he said, "Now I want you to follow me down all the way." And you know what? I did. I couldn't believe it. I was skiing all the way down. The minute I got to the bottom, I took off my skis and ran in and called my parents and said, "I can ski, I can ski, I can ski." I was so excited. I was so excited. And, you know, that means that I could do everything that he was doing, and that made me feel good, really good.
Coming back to the next episode that while working at MCV, you had problems with the heel cord so that you had to go back to Hopkins for more surgery.
Yes.
And then came home and went to work and drove yourself to work. And
Well, you know, first of all, I must say that Dr. Phelps had died. And so I started seeing Dr. Charles Silverstein, who had done a fellowship under Dr. Phelps. So he quickly became my third father. And in the early 30s, I went up to Hopkins, and I said, "We need to do some heel cord lengthening." And he did the surgery. I stayed in the hospital 1 week, and Dr. Silverstein came every day to see me. He knew I didn't know anybody in Baltimore, and he was just trying to be a good guy, which he was. And so then I came home and wore a brace, and I drove myself to work by putting my right casted leg over the hump in the car, and I had a left foot accelerator, and I just drove right on down.
does this sound a little bit like the story of trying to mount horseback?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. That was very exciting. And then now my right heel finally touched the floor. So shoes were needed. I mean, new shoes, because my toes had extended, and I had to have shoes to walk in that were comfortable. So it was the new shoes.
In your late 30s, you needed surgery to treat a disc problem, and I want to kind of skip over that because that surgeon is the surgeon who told you about Dr. Waltz and what he could do to help relieve you of palsy.
Okay? So when I was fully recovered, I was told of Dr. Waltz in the Bronx, who was doing brain surgery. He'd been doing it for 7 years. And anyone that had CP wants to be rid of it, believe me. So I went up and was interviewed by him, and he said, "Okay, I think you are a good candidate. I haven't done surgery on anyone your age before." So my parents came up for surgery, and at 8 a.m. the next day, I was lying on the stretcher, bald as an eagle. My head had to be shaven. And Daddy asked the doctor if he could come in and observe. And Dr. Waltz said, "I don't think so, because I want my full attention on Jane's brain." He said, I understand. So I had to be awake for the entire procedure because there's no feeling in the brain, and I just wanted them to get through the skull. I had to answer commands so the doctor would know where he was, like touch your nose, touch your eyes. And that way he would know if the probe was down far enough or needed to come up or what. He knew. So after 2 hours, I said, I'm tired, and I haven't been doing a thing. And he said, well, I tell you what, let's just stop and go in tomorrow and see if I can get your right thumb out, because my thumb was like this. I said, okay, that's fine. And so my parents happily greeted me, and I said to them, the cradle has stopped. A miracle has occurred on this operating table. And they both said yes, and we were all in tears.
But after this procedure, you had to be kind of retrained, reoriented. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that food never tasted better because it was right near the thalamus. So that was a really plus. Not that it had never tasted bad. And so I started intensive therapy with a physiatrist, Dr. Park, in Richmond for 5 or 6 months. And the first time in my life, I became really depressed.
But what were you learning, like how to eat, how to tie your shoes?
Yes, I was doing that. I knew shoes went on your feet. I knew the shoes were for your feet, but how do you put them on? And how do you tie the laces? How do you put on a coat, an arm? But that's a pattern. It's not just something that you learn, that you know. And because the brain is like a switchboard, it has all these little holes up here, and they were filling up with blood from the surgery. And so that's why I was losing all my patterns and had to be repatterned. So I was depressed, and I said, I don't like the doctor that you're sending me to for depression, and I want to stop having everything revolve around me. And I went back to work at MCV.
Fortunately, these are Jane's words. A new position at MCV became available for me, and it was a promotional opportunity.
It was. So I got paid for all my high work. You know, it really was neat.
And then comes the hip.
Okay. The next thing was the hip. And I found a Dr. Ng at the Anderson Orthopedic Clinic in Arlington. And those doctors in that clinic, each doctor does a limb or a socket. They don't do anything else but a leg or an arm or whatever. So it took me 5 months to get an appointment to see him. And it was at Christmas time. And Mother and I had met Dr. Ng, and he said to me, I know what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to give you a new titanium hip. I said, great. And the next question was, well, when can you do it? And he said, after carefully picking your donors, your blood donors. This was the age of HIV, so he wanted to be very sure that I carefully picked them. And he said, and I don't want you to be a donor. I don't. And I want you to have a complete x-ray, and I want you to have,
and then the insurance.
And then the insurance. He said, I want to be able to make the final decision of when I discharge you. I do not want the insurance company coming in and saying, okay, it's time to go. I'll make that decision. I said, okay, I can take care of that. So it was scheduled a week before Christmas, and after a friend drove me and Mother up, And I immediately wanted to see those bags of blood. I wanted to make sure they had my name on them and the donor. Absolutely, it was very important. So after surgery, much to my surprise, the nurse comes in and gets me up. And do you know what? I'm standing even for the first time in my life. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So the reason for that was that Dr. Ng had put a 1-inch prosthesis on the end of my hip and had put it into the femur. So I was even. So
Was that more new shoes?
no, that was fine. No, that was fine. And then I had daily therapy for 10 days, and then I come home to a 2-story condominium with all this paraphernalia, and the bedroom was on the 2nd floor. But they had cleverly designed a walker that had a long pole on it, and I could hold onto it with my right hand and use my left hand to hold the railing, and I would walk up the stairs. Incredible.
Wow.
It really was. I engaged around-the-clock nurses to help me, and before long, I was walking around the neighborhood with only a nurse.
Now tell us about the party.
Oh, yes. So I said to myself, these people, all of them, the doctors, the therapists, the nurses, the drivers, they've all been so kind. I must reward them. And so I gave a hip, hip, hooray party. And I asked one of my doctors, Dr. Silverstein, I said, I can't believe that you all would come all the way up here, spend the night to go to a party. He said, but Jane, how many of our patients give parties for us? So
Was it at that point that you decided you needed to become a serious student and
yes,
get a degree?
Yes, I did. Previously I was interested in the physical things that I could do. And now I learned that I needed a degree. So I enrolled in Mary Baldwin's adult degree program, which meant that I could take classes in Richmond at the University of Richmond or VCU, but I had to follow Mary Baldwin's curriculum. They were the ones that told me what I could and couldn't take. I soon realized that VCU had many barriers. And I had been on the committee for the disabled for quite a while, and so I started to work on changes that needed to be made. Handicapped parking spaces, railings in the library. You remember that big library? Didn't have one railing in it, not one. Rear entrances needed to be lit. They needed lighting at night. They needed railings. And so I worked on that. And absolutely, I went to the provost and told her what needed to be done, and she helped me accomplish all this.
So you got it done.
Yeah, I got it done. I got it. But not just for me, for everybody.
Oh, no, of course,
for everybody.
Of course.
About this time, I am walking. I am working on my graduate degree.
No,
No?
we got to graduate first.
Oh, that's right. We do have to graduate first. Oh, yes, that was a very important thing. I received a phone call from the director of the adult degree program saying they had decided that I could not walk down the stairs in Stanton, that they wanted me to drive down. And I said, I don't think so. I want to walk, and all you have to do is to give me a strong arm. And if I happen to fall, which I'm sure I won't, I will not sue you. And so he said, well, okay. Well, on the day of graduation, my faculty advisor comes to me and says, Jane, they have decided that you really shouldn't take the risk of walking down those stairs. I said, I'm walking. I am walking down those stairs. I want a strong arm. I walked all the way down the stairs with no problem. When I got to the bottom, there was the faculty sitting there, and I bowed to them. And I went on and sat with my class, and then they called my name, and I came up, and I graduated with distinction, by the way, which was very astounding for someone that wasn't a student. I curtsied to the audience, and a lot of my friends were out there because I had chartered a bus to bring everybody from Richmond up to Stanton to see me graduate, and then I had a luncheon for them afterwards. So that was really fun. That was really fun. And then at 67, Ernie walked into my life. Well, actually, he waltzed into it. And he gave me so much confidence and a shoulder to lean on, and it was just great having a partner with that. So
Shortly thereafter, you decided to apply to Westminster Canterbury.
that is correct, yes. And so we came over here and applied to Westminster Canterbury, put our deposit down, and was so happy and all. And so, but the day after doing that, I had a doctor's appointment with Dr. Michael Simpson about my back. My back was giving me some problems. And Dr. Simpson examined me and he said, "Jane, you've got to have surgery." I said, no, I cannot have surgery. I'm going to Westminster Canterbury. I put my deposit down. And he said, "If you don't, you're going to have very severe back problems." So he had a list of all the times and days the next week that he could do this. So we picked a day, and then I went to the phone and I called Wyatt Beasley. And I said, "Wyatt, what do I do? I've put my deposit down. I want to come to Westminster Canterbury, but I got to have this emergency surgery." Wyatt says, "Jane, tell them the truth. Write them a letter and say, I've got to have this emergency operation, and I've got to have it, and when I get through and the doctor gives me a discharge letter, I will bring it over here to you." And that's what I did.
I hope Wyatt Beasley is in the audience to hear this story himself.
He is.
So after your stay at the Taj Mahal Recuperation Center,
That's where they sent me. It was then called the Taj Mahal, and it was actually a rehab center, and they took me there by ambulance after 2 days of being in the hospital, and I recuperated there. And it was a therapy all day long. So,
so then came the day that you got the letter and you came to Westminster Canterbury to present it, but decided to stop ahead of time at Stir Crazy right here in the neighborhood for a beverage. And
as I was getting out of the car, I happened to fall going up the stairs, the curb, and I couldn't believe it. And I was in such pain, and everybody around wanted to call the ambulance. I said, no, I'm going to Westminster Canterbury. Just go over there to the drugstore and get me a bottle of extra strength Tylenol. I took 4 pills, got back in the car, and drove over here. And I thought, now I have a cane in the car, but at that time they didn't like you to use any aid to come in. So I debated, and so I went in and I took the letter and I said to the courtyard, "Please give this to the sales office, Mary Bryden, and I'm just using this cane because I just don't feel so good today." And then everything healed, and I was fine.
No, then you've got to get yourself to the hospital.
Oh, yes. So then I had to drive to the hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, and I parked in the policeman's parking space because I knew they'd come out. I couldn't get out of the car. I could not. I was in such pain. So they brought me a stretcher and took me into the emergency room, and it turned out that I had a fractured pelvis. So they bandaged me up and kept me for 2 days, and I went home to recuperate. And I did. And then eventually I healed, and at age 68, I was called by Mary Bryden to come into Westminster, but with the restriction that I could walk from the courtyard desk to the second floor north wing, down to the garage, to my parking space and back. And if I could do that, the apartment was mine. Well, guess what? I did it. I did it. So, and I did it proudly. So when I was 71, I contacted Dr. Silverstein in Baltimore and told him I needed an evaluation. Something was going on with my body. It seemed to be getting weaker, and I didn't understand that. So Ernie drove me up to Baltimore, and Dr. Silverstein looked at me, and he said, Jane, I think we need to do some extensive work here with all the disciplines. And so I want you to plan on coming up 3 days a week for a month, and we will go through everything. Well, as it turned out, we only did 2 days a week, and I called my church, First Presbyterian, and I said, do you all have any people that are registered to take people on trips or something? Well, yeah, they did. So I knew Ernie couldn't do it, and I certainly couldn't do it, so they took me up there. And the end result was that I was getting weaker, as I had been progressively during my life. And he wanted me to start walking with a Canadian crutch. And I said, oh. And then he said, and I want you to wear a brace. I said, a brace? Yep. And then the final blow was, I know the size of Westminster Canterbury, and I really think you need a power chair. Oh, no. Oh, no. So Ernie and I went out and bought the Cadillac version of a power chair. It sat in my room for 2 months. I refused to use it. I guess that was being proud. I'm not sure, but I didn't use it. I just didn't want to admit that I could no longer walk distances. But I relented, and, that's what happened.
And next comes the shoulder.
Yeah, at 73, my left shoulder was giving out because of all the use that was required for daily living. So I went to see a doctor, and he said, you've got to have a total shoulder replacement. Well, my left arm is my doing arm, and the right is my helping hand, but it doesn't do anything except help. And so I was scheduled for a replacement, and I went to Will in healthcare, and I said, Will, I'm prepared to hire a nurse, a round-the-clock nurse, to help me do things like brushing my hair, brushing my teeth, toileting, feeding, everything. I could not do a thing. And he said, Jane, we're trained to do that. And please let me have a week with you. And if at the end of the week we come back and you tell me how we're doing. So I said, okay. And they even gave me a flat pad that I would push instead of a clicker, the thing you use to call the nurse. But it was just a flat pad, and I just put it on my chest and just touched it, and they came running. So that worked out very well. But it was wonderful to see how the whole team worked together. And here I was sitting in the dining room with somebody feeding me like I'm a baby. And I just couldn't believe it. So the surgery went well, and so
I think what we've heard from Jane is a line of wonderful doctors in Baltimore. This one trained this one, trained this one, trained this one. And now we come, I think, to the one you have just been in contact by phone and email in the last few months.
yes. About 3 or 4 months ago, my palsy started acting up. And I was dropping things, and I couldn't understand what was going on. So I called Orly Kahn at the Kennedy Kruger Institute, which is an arm of Hopkins. And I said, Orly, you've got to give me a CP specialist. I can't get up there, but I need someone. So she did. She found a Dr. Alexander Hoon, who said he would take me on. And he called me, and we talked for 45 minutes the first day. He gave me his cell phone number, and we emailed back and forth, and we're still doing it. So my sister said to me, Sister Susan, she said, Jane, do you ever feel like, I wish it wasn't I? I said, no. I wish it was somebody. No, that's not me. I don't feel that way. And I said to her, Susan, Daddy told me on his dying bed that he knew that God had picked him and Mother to have as my parents because he, being a doctor, could take care of me and could see that I got the best care available and that it would show to other people what you can do in living with a disability and do it well. So that is my incredible story, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing your story with us. A lot of determination and inspiration for all of us. We have a few minutes, so we're going to take some questions for the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Jessica will come to you with the mic.
Jane, I want to hear about your climbing a mountain in Switzerland because I've been on ski trips with you and I have watched you ski and you are amazing going down those slopes like that. And when I read your little bio, it said you'd climbed a mountain in Switzerland and I wasn't surprised and I want to hear about it.
All right, thank you. It was a very good question. Yes, I did climb a mountain in Switzerland. I called home and asked Mother to please send me my tennis shoes. I didn't have any tennis shoes. And so I said to the leader, I said, all I need is an arm and we can go. And so we climbed the mountain up to the very top, spent the night, and we had dinner that night. The next morning we were served breakfast, and we came back down the mountain, and guess what? I went to bed and slept for the rest of the day.
I think so.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have? Well, Jane, I have a quick question for you. You've been such an advocate for yourself. So what would your recommendation or piece of advice would you give to other individuals who have CP who may be facing some of these same challenges?
Don't give up. And if you want to do it, try it. Because you only know whether you can do it if you try. If you want to do it and don't try, you don't know. You don't know. So to try it, be an advocate and do it for yourself. And also, as a lot of you all know, I am on the accessibility committee here at Westminster, and I have worked to get doors opened with a punch And we're in a meeting next week to try to get some more things worked on.
Good, good.
And that, I mean, you just keep trying. You just don't give up. Don't say no unless you don't want to do it.
That's probably a pretty good lesson for all of us in this room.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Oh, I see a hand in the back. 1 second.
I've known Jane for a long time, not as long as everybody else in my family. She knows what I'm talking about. She's a wonderful girl. We all love her. We have known her. A sister has been to Hawaii with her. It's been innumerable types and times of traveling, and all we can say is we love you and we're proud of you.
Thank you, Carrie. Lee and I had a wonderful trip in Hawaii. In fact, we even rode down the mountain, the crater in Haleakala, that was a trail on horseback that you rode on a narrow path all the way down to where the silver swords were growing. And we just sat there and thought, oh, look what we've done. We had to climb back up the mountain too, but it was on a horse, and I had experience with horseback riding. So it was a wonderful trip, and I thank you very much. That was very kind.
Perfect. Well, I think it's safe to say that we can all leave here today with a little more self-confidence and determination. And Jane, you have inspired us all, so thank you for sharing your story. And I will tell you all that Jane is very willing to answer any other questions or continue her conversation and share her stories with you. So if you have anything after you leave today, please feel free to reach out to Jane. You guys can maybe grab coffee or something, and she'll continue her stories with you. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ann for our closing remarks.
Just want to let you know, thank you again one more time, Jane.
Well, Anne, thank you. You know, in working with Anne, not only have I relived my journeys through life, but I've climbed ladders that I just didn't realize I'd done. I mean, I did them, but then when I was forced to go back and go over all these, I just think, wow. I just can't believe
that's
it.
a good word to end with. Wow. Our next month, I will introduce our speaker, and I'm glad to let you know that it will be Bob Hetherington.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Who Knew.